How do I help my child with OCD? It can seem like such an easy question that requires a very easy answer, but in fact, it's a little bit more complicated than that. That is the number one question I get from people here on YouTube and from parents inside my AT parenting community. I'm going to walk you through how to answer that question so that you know what your next steps are, because they'll be different for each one of you. Stay tuned. That's what's up next. Hi, my name is Natasha Daniels, and if you're new to my channel, welcome. I am an anxiety and OCD child therapist, and I'm supporting you so you can help your child with anxiety or OCD. So let's talk about where to start. How do you help your child with OCD? Well, the first question to ask yourself is, what's my child's response when I try to talk to them about OCD? That's where I always start with parents. I say, can you talk to them about their OCD? So let me show you what that means. If you say, hey, I want to talk to you about your OCD, I want to really support you, and your child says, I don't want to talk about it. Or your child says, why do you always want to talk about my OCD? Or your child says, I don't have OCD. What is your problem? Or your child says, and they run off. They don't even talk to you. Those are some clear indicators, or some rendition of that. Those are clear indicators that your first step, your only step, as far as it goes when you're working with your child, is to validate, normalize, and improve communication around OCD. You might have to step back and actually work on your communication in general. If they just run out of the room and they don't want to talk to you about their feelings at all, we're going to have to work on communication. If they don't want to talk to you just about OCD, there may be issues with shame or embarrassment or some stereotyped idea of what OCD is that makes them want to run off. Or they think you're going to force them into therapy or force them to do things that they're uncomfortable with. You can't move forward with your child if they're not even able to talk to you. You can't do it for them. So if they can't communicate, we've got to stop with that. We've got to build the communication. And so that might mean that you incentivize them and you say, will you watch a video, a YouTube video, a 5-minute YouTube video, once a day, and you can earn blah, blah, blah. I'm very big on the incentives. And so that is how I've moved the dial for my own kids. I have 3 kids with anxiety and OCD. And even though I'm a therapist, I will want to educate them. And they in the past were very resistant, and I would gamify it. And I would say, look, if you can watch this YouTube video for 5 minutes, and it was my video, it's like, watch your mom on YouTube. But for some reason, because it's on YouTube, it made a big difference. I was like, if you can watch this 5-minute video, you can earn bravery points. And we set up a bravery point system where they earn points and they can cash it in for different things. And at different times, it was different stuff. It was slime, it was Roblox, it was Robux, it was Legos, earning points to cash them in for bravery points. And a lot of times we don't think that watching a video is working on OCD, but that's like the second step. The first step is just getting them to be willing to talk about it at all. But education is the second step. And so if we can gamify it and offer incentives, that moved the dial for my kids. And I have teens right now. I have a 13, 15, and 21-year-old. You can gamify it for any age. There's a currency for every age. And just say, watch this 5-minute video, because we want to educate them. And you want to find a video that is very specific, ideally, to their OCD theme. And you may not know that. And that's where my second point comes in. How much do you know about OCD? Because if you're in a blind room trying to guide your child, how are you going to find the exit point? How are you going to find your way around that dark room? You need a flashlight. You need education. This is a step that parents miss all the time. I have so many parents in my AT parenting community who jump into the community and they say, Natasha, how do I help my child with OCD? And they'll be like, they are in the shower for 5 hours and they're straightening things up and they're over wiping until it feels just right. And they're asking me questions like, are they a bad person? And they're having me wash my hands for this. And how do I help them with that? And it's like, those are all symptoms. It's like saying to someone, she has a fever and she has a rash. What medicine do I give them? Well, besides treating the symptoms, treat the rash, treat the fever, we're not getting to the origin, right? That's not going to solve the problem, because I kind of want to know, why do I have the fever and why do I have the rash? You don't go to a doctor and they're just like, here, take cortisone. And you're like, oh, great, thanks. I'm always like, but why do I have the rash, right? Why are they taking a long shower? Why are they over wiping? Why are they having me wash my hands? Those are symptoms. They're not telling you what the OCD theme is. And so your first step is to understand the OCD themes, because they do make a difference in understanding the flavors and disguises of how OCD shows up. OCD is one of the most unique disorders in the DSM criteria for mental health disorders. It is such a chameleon. It looks so different for different people that unless you know all the flavors and disguises, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. And the third step, which we're going to get to in a second, is how you're going to find this stuff. You're going to find the core fear. You're going to find the OCD theme, because without that, you're going to have a really hard time supporting your child. So you can see this is very complicated and layered, right? You can't find that out if you don't know yourself what you're looking for, what you're looking at, and how to ask the right questions. So the next step is educate yourself. I have courses. Besides these videos on YouTube, I have a systematic course that teaches parents in under 3 hours how to understand OCD and how to support their child with OCD. I teach you about all the themes. I teach you about ERP, exposure response prevention. And that is really what we want to do. You want to learn first before you start coaching your child. You don't become a soccer coach and you don't know how to play the game. It doesn't make any sense, right? And you can't go on the field and kick the ball for your child and be like, woohoo, goal. We made a goal. They're going to kick you off the field. So learn the game, learn OCD. You can't go on the field. You're going to have to coach your child from the sideline, and you can't be an effective coach until you understand what you're coaching. So education is key. You can go to my school at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. I've got all sorts of classes, but the one I always tell parents to take is how to teach your kids to crush OCD. The first big lessons are the themes, because you need to know the themes. The next thing, let's say you already have all this. Let's say you're Natasha, I'm educated. I know the themes. And my child is willing to talk about it, and they have watched the videos. How do I help my child with OCD? You can see now that that's a pretty loaded question, right? Because it depends on where you are on this journey. A lot of people who join my community, they are already well seasoned. They have taken my course or they've read books, and they're already over here where I'm about to talk. And so when they ask me, how do I help my child with OCD? We're having a much more advanced dialogue than some people who are just starting out, which may be you. So once you have incentivized your child to watch videos, which helps them normalize OCD, validate their struggle, educate them, then you educate yourself, right, by understanding OCD themes, learning what ERP is, exposure response prevention, the go-to evidence-based approach for OCD. Then we need to swing back to our kids and we need to say to them, let's explore OCD. And then we want to find out what their core fear is and what their OCD themes are. If that's Greek to you, that means that your first step is the education piece. You can't move on to 3 until you do 2. And so what does that look like? Well, let me give you an example. So when my child was struggling with going to school, I have many examples, but we'll use this one. I knew that she didn't want to go to school. It was clear that she was anxious. It was clear that she was kind of compulsively asking for reassurance. She would say to me, do you think I'm going to get sick? Do I look like I'm sick? Can you take my temperature? Tell me I'm not going to throw up. Those were all compulsions. I knew those were compulsions, but I didn't know what her core fear was. I knew that we were looking at emetophobia, which is a very fancy big name for the fear of throwing up, which is an anxiety OCD theme. It's one of those weird themes that can actually be both anxiety or OCD, but she had the OCD type because she had a lot of compulsions, checking for her temperature, asking me reassurance questions over and over, avoiding school. And so I would have a conversation with her and I would say, we named her OCD. Personifying OCD can be really helpful. Some kids don't like it, but a lot of kids do. And it separates OCD from them so we can talk about it as something we're tackling together. And so she called it O Cloud. And I would say to her, what does O Cloud say will happen if you get sick at school? First, I wasn't even sure if sick meant throwing up or if sick meant, getting a fever. And so I needed that clarification. And she said, well, it means I'll throw up. So, okay, now I know we're in a emetophobia world. And I said, what is the scariest thing O Cloud says will happen if you throw up? That phrasing of that question is very powerful. What is the scariest thing about throwing up? Why is that important? Because if I say, why is throwing up scary, even though it's the same question, semantics, it can put kids on the defensive. So how we ask questions is also really important. So when I say, what is the scariest part? It may sound so minor and not a big difference, but it is, because I am acknowledging that, of course, it's scary for you. And what is the scariest? It's so subtle, but it's so powerful. When you talk to kids for 2 decades, like I have as a therapist, you start to learn what will open up the dialogue and what won't. And this was a game changer for me. So when I say, what was the scariest part? What is the scariest part that O Cloud says will happen? Again, also personifying OCD and externalizing it so that she doesn't feel like she's scared, because there's a lot of pride with some of our kids. It's not her, it's O Cloud. And so she said, well, O Cloud says if I throw up, then no one will like me. I'll be gross and disgusting and I'll lose all my friends. Well, there was the core fear. Her core fear was, I will lose all my friends. And the gross and disgusting part was actually very interesting too, because she does have some disgust-based OCD themes outside of emetophobia. But that's another story for another video. So I've got some information now. I know that her core fear is that her friends won't like her. And I know that her OCD theme is the fear of throwing up. That's one of many themes that she has, but that helps me. So learning how to ask the right questions is very helpful. You won't know what to ask if you don't do step number 2. So educate your child, educate yourself. People just skip over this, and it's so incredibly important. And then you'll ask the right questions in the right way to start to develop the understanding of the OCD theme and the core fear. When you know that, you can start doing exposures, which is ERP, exposure response prevention. That is a whole nother ball of wax. People take entire courses to learn how to do ERP. It can be done at home if it's done with the right training. That's why there are courses and books on how to do ERP. My course, How to Teach Kids to Crush OCD, includes that and walks you through how to do ERP, or find a good ERP therapist. You can find one. You can find the directories at iocdf.org/find-help, or you can go to NoCD at treatmyocd.com. They offer virtual OCD assessments and therapy in lots of states, I think in all states and globally as well. So, and it can be both. You can learn ERP, you can learn this stuff, and you can get professional help. I do think that both are equally important. Get your own support and also get support for your child, because a lot of times therapists don't involve the parent. So you have to know what you're doing, because you're living in the home, you're with your child 24/7. And if you're not knowledgeable, then you are probably inadvertently growing the OCD, which is so tricky. If you want your child to understand what OCD is, if that is the first step, watch this next video on what is OCD. This is a great first video to show your kids. If you have a particular theme that you already know they're struggling with, let me know in the comments and I will recommend a video for them in particular to watch so you can incentivize them and get the ball rolling. I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. Take care.